Well, welcome into the Fantasy Sanctuary here on our Fantasy Game Day channel as we break down Week 11, talking about the UK's best and newest DFS platform, where we are going to make UK DFS great again. DraftKings doesn't want us, but the guys at Fantasy Game Day do, and they keep bringing us new games and new formats. We're going to get into the Sunday Stars, the main slate on Sunday, and all the different teams and what we like there. We're going to talk quarterbacks, we're going to talk value plays, we're going to talk stacks, and so much more. But Rich, last week they launched their new contest, Ballers, which is quite similar to DraftKings Showdown. Instead of having kickers and defense, though, it is a smaller lineup. You've got one captain who earns 1.5 times the normal points. They have loosened the salary for this week. Did you dive into it last week? What were your kind of thoughts on the format?
Yeah, played a little bit. It's particularly the Giants Panthers game, with the pool being so small of available players. One subtle move either way made such a big difference when it got to that leaderboard. So I know you had a pretty good week on the Ballers. What do you think of the new format?
Yeah, I think I cashed in all three of the primetime games that they put out, the Germany game, then the Sunday night game, and the Monday night game. I think it's one where you can look at it quite coldly. You can just go, right, what is the team that's projected to score the most points? And obviously there's quite a tight salary cap, so you have to look at some of the guys who are 2,200. I think you want a maximum of 2 of them in your lineup. I don't think you can get to 3 in an attempt to really load up at the other 2 positions. But hitting on those 2 guys who are the cheapest is a big part of it. And of course, if you're reading the game previews, which are in the Discord every week, then you know which of those guys are going to have the better matchup. So definitely, I think it's a format which we can exploit over the next few weeks. I mean, it's going to take some time for some people to get used to it. And I would just be looking to try and build differently to the field, because dupes in that format with the cash being quite flat, it's not ideal, and I don't really want to split any of my earnings with anyone else. But let's get into this slate and our captain picks this week. Starting with Devon Achan, who gets an absolute nut matchup against the Raiders, who have been awful against the running back position all year. We've seen Devon Achan so far. He's been excellent in the receiving game in these games with Tua. He's not been so great on the ground this year, but he seems to have a really solid role. Raiders have allowed 3 top 4 weekly finishes to running backs, including 26.7 points to Chase Brown in their last game before the bye week. Do you think that Devon Achan is just one of the easiest starts of the week?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at it, solid over under at 44.5. Really great matchup, as you just highlighted there. He's getting the workload. Raheem Mostert hasn't seen a carry since he fumbled a week and a half ago. Jalen Wright, rookie, hasn't been worked in a huge amount. They seem to be trusting Devon Achan. He has seen at least 5 targets in every single game that Tua has started and finished. And you're getting a little bit of value because he's only at 6,400 rather than being at the 7,000-8,000 that some of these other elite options are. I think it's an absolute smash play. It's a guy that has got a good floor, but has also got that game-breaking ceiling as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, before that RB24 finish against the Rams, he'd scored 23 or more points in every game with Tua, and the Raiders ranked 29th in run defense DVOA. It just seems too easy. He's the only piece of that offense that I have any faith in right now, so I would definitely be looking to play Achan in at least one lineup as we go into this weekend and seeing what I can build around there. As we get on to the second captain pick, though, like if this is your first time finding us here on this channel, hit the like and hit the subscribe button. Each week we do these preview shows talking about the slate. In our Discord, we're putting content together. We've built lineup creators to help people use projections and build smarter lineups for this format. And we're going to keep bringing more stuff out for Fantasy Game Day over the next few weeks. Christian McCaffrey, 7K. Obviously, last week it wasn't particularly impressive with 3.0 yards per carry, but he was involved in receiving game. He's obviously going to ramp up over time. Do you think that this is the week where we see CMC look like how he used to look last season?
Hopefully, I really hope so. But at this value, he doesn't necessarily have to be. I mean, £1,200 cheaper than Derrick Henry, £800 cheaper than Saquon Barkley, £400 cheaper than Joe Mixon. Like, this is probably the last time you can get Christian McCaffrey at sub 7,500. Like, he's a great value at 7,000. It's a really nice matchup against Seattle. 49.5 over under. I thought he looked okay in the run game last week, but I thought he looked good in the receiving game, and that's where the value is. That's where we know that Christian McCaffrey can kind of separate himself. I just think that there is potential that this could be right. We need to start ramping things up because the 49ers aren't like playoff bound set
Nope.
up. They're not, 10-1 or are absolutely cruising here. They need to win every single week. And I think they're going to load up Christian McCaffrey. He's had a week, he's not had any setbacks, and kind of ride him into the sunset, hopefully.
Yeah, so I mean, really, it's 7,000. Ideally, you're hoping for a 20-point game. Last week, he had 16.9. But I think it's important to note that what we're seeing on Fantasy Game Day is you don't always have to be perfect at the captain position. Last week was a week where on the show I talked about thinking that the scores were going to be much more subdued than the previous week, and it played out. Bijan was obviously the best captain that was out there, but in the 25-pound contest, the top three all had different captains. There was Bijan, Kamara, and Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson obviously had a poor game, but it didn't matter if you built around it properly. In the 7-pound 50, that was mainly Bijan in the top 10, but there's also Aaron Jones and even a Deebo Samuel team in there. The 3-pound winner had James Conner. There was also Kareem Hunt. There was some DeAndre Swift teams in the top 6. So maybe there's a little more leeway in the captain selection than we thought there was, but at this value, there just seems like there's no reason to go away from CMC. I would be quite happy to plug him in plenty of lineups, and that's a game in general that I want to target because I think that it's got a lot of fantasy potential, and there's lots of ways that we can attack it. Let's talk about the stacks of the week, and we'll just go straight to the Niners because that's where we've been talking. Obviously, you could look at Brock Purdy and look to stack him with CMC. George Kittle at 5,800 had a really good game last time these two teams played. Last time the Niners played, he had that incredible touchdown last week. We also saw Juwan Jennings go out, and now he's had over 64 receiving yards in, I think, 4 of his 7 games that he's played this year. Deebo Samuel, last time that these two teams met, he went out there and had, I think it was 7 for 111 yards and a touchdown. Really impressive day for all of them. Brock Purdy, 24 fantasy points. Is there a way that in particular stands out to you that you want to stack this game?
I think the best value for me is the Purdy Jennings stack. I really like that. I think, we talked about Deebo last week being amazing value at 5,200. He's got a better matchup this week. He's only £200 cheaper, and we're almost brushing over him. I think he's still a really good value. And as you said, last time against Seattle, he was fantastic. So, yeah, paying almost 6,000 for a tight end, that's maybe a little bit too rich for me in terms of Kittle. But yeah, if you can go Purdy with CMC and maybe one of Jennings or Deebo, I think that's a really interesting way to attack this. And there's plenty of intriguing bring back options on the other side, whether you want to go Walker, whether you believe DK is going to come back healthy and walk straight in and ball out, or whether you think the JSN deeper A dot and potential could be there. So yeah, I think this is a game. It's got that almost 50 over under. There's plenty of ways to attack it and some really intriguing options.
Yeah, and in the full game week preview, we talked about this matchup in more detail. But look, Seattle allow the 12th most quarterback fantasy points, the 10th most to running backs, the 11th most to wide receivers, and the 12th most to tight ends. I'm not sure that is a wrong way to stack it, and instead, I'd just look to get creative with how we build around that. One team that's always getting creative is the Detroit Lions. Obviously, the passing volume hasn't been there this year because their defense has taken a step forward. They are taking on the miserable Jags. Last time I looked, the Lions were favored by 13 points. So do you think that you want to go any deeper than stacking Jared Goff and Amon-Ra? Would you be throwing in the guys like Sam Laporta and Jameson Williams because this Jacksonville defense is just atrocious? They rank 32nd in pass defense DVOA. Or do you just want to take the known quantity of Amon-Ra and get out of there?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this before we did the show and sort of said, do we like any other options? And the simple answer is no. I think Sam Laporta's not 100%. We don't know if he's going to play. Jameson Williams, the one good thing this Jags defense can do is rush the passer, and they've got a decent corner in I want to say Tyson Campbell. I forgot his name now, who plays on the outside. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to feast in the slot. I really like attacking this as like a skinny stack of just Goff and St. Brown. I don't think I want anything else in this matchup. As you said, it's very one-sided. I don't know if the Jags are going to score enough points for this to be a barn burner. So maybe I just want to keep it as skinny as possible, get some good value from Goff, get some good value from St. Brown, and roll forward.
Yeah, and Amon-Ra St. Brown enters this game on a streak of 7 consecutive games where he scored a touchdown. He's scored 18 or more PPR points in 6 of his last 9 games. Like, Amon-Ra, it's just very hard to get away from him. Meanwhile, let people worry about Sam Laporte and Jameson Williams, and we'll just add people from other games instead. One other stack, and this is one which I had to push you to put in here because, hey, as a Ravens fan, it's been pretty bleak on defense. Everyone keeps rolling up to the Ravens and having their best game of the season. Yes, the Ravens tend to win those games, but Russell Wilson, over the last few games since he became the starter, is averaging 245 passing yards per game. He's got 6 passing touchdowns and a rushing touchdown in that game. It's really, really clicking with George Pickens right now. George Pickens looks like somebody that I think we're going to be talking about in 3rd round, if not the 2nd round of redraft leagues next year. Mike Williams only had the 1 target last week, but it was the only one that mattered with the walk-off touchdown. Are you thinking that they're just going to continue to roll the Ravens pass defense and that this should be super fun? Do you think that this is possibly a little expensive for Russ Wilson? Where are you landing on this, Rich?
I think that's it. I really like Pickens as a standalone pick. And I think that Mike Williams at 2,400, he's not quite what I would class comfortable enabler territory, but he's in that kind of dart throw, he needs one deep shot and he's paid off his price kind of thing. The thing I struggle with is Russell Wilson at 6,200. Like, that's quite expensive. I get if you're going for the stack, it's fine, but to pay £1,000 more than Jared Goff to get Russell Wilson just feels like I'm kind of giving up a lot of value there. So yeah, I'm okay with it. I love the matchup, but I just don't know if the value is there with Wilson as much.
Yeah.
I'd kind of rather play this as a pick-in standalone pick.
Yeah, and I think there's one of the reasons I wanted to highlight it is I think that a lot of people will go Lamar with Pickens on the other side, and it obviously that's a fine play as well. But with Russ over Goff, I think it's just going to be the passing volume's going to be there because the Ravens will put up points in the way the Jags won't. The Lions can be quite happy to lean into the run at times. So I do think passing volume is going to sustain Russ here in a way that is probably a little bit more fragile with Jared Goff. I mean, Russ has had 28, and 29 pass attempts per game so far. So yeah, I think that it's fragile for sure, and you probably can't do it with an expensive captain. You'll have to come down slightly to be able to do it, but I'm into it mainly because that way, if the Ravens get embarrassed, I'll at least make some money out of it. Moving over to our favorite plays, Garrett Wilson, 6,000. Going up against the Colts, Garrett Wilson had over the last 4 games, he does have 6 targets fewer than Devontae Adams, who's at 39. But Garrett Wilson leads all wide receivers in targets at 99 targets so far this year. He's the wide receiver 3 in total PPR points. And perhaps with Joe Flacco out of the side and with Anthony Richardson now under center, it keeps this game a little bit more interesting and the Jets have to go a bit pass heavier. Are you with me, or have you had too much of the Jets in your life lately?
No, I'm just fed up talking about the Jets. I'll be honest. I'd rather just not. I get it. I think it's decent value. I think there's absolutely a world where the Jets have to pass a little bit. I do kind of wonder if there's a little bit of sort of FU in the Jets and Rodgers right now that everyone's writing them off. I think it's going to go one of two ways. It's either going to be another 6-point outing, or they could right the ship in 1 week and come out and put a lot of points up. So yeah, I'll probably have some shares. I think there's also a reasonable shout out for Devontae Adams, who at £5,000 I think is quite cheap for a decent wide receiver potentially. So yeah, I like Garrett Wilson. Not going to have huge amounts for him, but yeah, I'll certainly sprinkle him in.
Yeah, the reason I lean towards Garrett Wilson was just like last week with Devontae Adams, his air yards per target was 5.9, which it's like 4 yards less than Garrett Wilson. It was just a bit miserable, and I just prefer the usage with Garrett Wilson, but I definitely wouldn't avoid playing Devontae Adams either, and it might be a more accessible one to get to when you're building your lineups. Moving over to Kyren Williams, though, 2nd in the league in total running back touches at 201. He has been useful for fantasy purposes. He hasn't always been effective in the running game this year. Do you think that this is one of those kind of get right spots against the Patriots team that when it comes to the ground game, well, when it comes to defense in general, they just struggle this year, but they rank 26th against the run in DVOA. They've allowed the 7th most running back fantasy points. Do you think that there's going to be enough juice in this game to keep Kyron Williams close to ceiling potential?
Yeah, I think so. I think that, if it wasn't for Devon Acham being £200 cheaper and potentially having a better matchup, I think we'd be maybe talking about Kyron Williams in the captain slot. I think he's got a good matchup. I think he's gonna, the ideal play of high floor with a high ceiling. I think it's a good lineup. We know that the Patriots have struggled against the run. We know that Blake Corum isn't basically getting involved at all, and Sean McVay's just going to ride Kyron Williams. So yeah, I like the lineup. I like the pick. I like the value. I'm happy to be putting him in quite a few lineups, I think. And at 6,600, it is a nice price.
It is a nice price, and that's probably what will draw me into a little bit of Kyron Williams. I am slightly concerned with the fact that he's had 3 top 10 finishes this year, only 1 since week 4. It's not quite doing it in the way that we would like, but Kyron Williams, like, we know the Rams love him. We know he's going to be out there, and I think this one, in this matchup, it makes plenty of sense. Cedric Tillman at 4,800. Like, I was quite down on Cedric Tillman against the Chargers before the Browns bye. I thought that it could be too much of a tough matchup for him. Well, he went out and had 6 for 75 and a touchdown against them. He's averaged 85 receiving yards per game since week 7 and scored no fewer than 18 PPR points in that time. This week, he gets the Saints, who traded away Marshall and Lattimore, haven't been particularly good on defense all year. Jameis Winston revenge game. Do you think the ceiling is the roof of the dome for Tillman this week?
Absolutely. And look, we know Jameis Winston isn't a great quarterback, but he's going to take shots and he's going to push the ball down the field. Cedric Tillman, since Amari Cooper was traded, has been a top 5 wide receiver in fantasy points. I think the guy looks really impressive. It's not one of these where he's flashing in stats and you kind of scratch your head trying to work out why. He looks really good. He's getting open on contested catches. He's posted 100% contested catch rate since Amari Cooper was traded, which is just absolutely bonkers. Yeah, I really like the price. I really like the pick. It feels like it's hard to get away from when you're getting a guy who's got top 5 wide receiver upside for less than £5,000.
Yeah, and 4,800 is a range where we want to be looking on Fantasy Game Day. It feels quite often that that's an area where we start to find some real value there. So I'm always kind of trying to find which wide receivers in there can we fit into our teams. And Cedric Tillman, like I say, I wasn't there a couple of weeks ago, but to get him now at 4,800 when we've seen how impressive he can be, it really stands out. And I think that when you look at that range this week, there is, you're getting Cedric Tillman for a couple of hundred cheaper than Devontae Adams, and I've got more confidence in Cedric Tillman than I do Devontae Adams. In terms of the key enablers, those guys who are even cheaper than this, let's go all the way down to Audric Estime, who is coming off, an 86% running back share in the last game. Javonte Williams had 1 carry. Marvin Mims had more carries than Javonte Williams did last week. Julian McLaughlin seems to be dust. Do you think Audric Estime in this matchup is going to be just like, is it the coming out party for him against the Falcons, who admittedly are pretty good against the running back position in fantasy? They allow the 10th fewest fantasy points to the position.
I don't think at this value, it doesn't even need to be the coming out party. It just needs to be like a mild shindig, really. I think for me, I put together my values, my projections, and put it all in a spreadsheet for all of our members. He's the best value on this entire slate. I think if you talk about at 2,200, you're ideally targeting kind of 8 fantasy points. If he gives you 10 points, he's 4 times his price. It's absolutely fantastic. There's very few chances where you get a running back where you can almost pencil in, worst case scenario, he's getting me 10 carries, plus might get a little bit of receiving work. This sort of value is absolutely wild. So yeah, I'm hopeful. We talked about on our main preview show that I'm not that excited. He's in like running back 3 territory for me, but at this price, he's an absolute smash.
Yeah, and you mentioned like the amount of touches, and he had 14 touches last week, and now he's playing the Falcons, who I said, they don't let huge amounts of fantasy points get away from them. But in week 10, they did allow Alvin Kamara 15.9, which was a down game by his standards, but would be completely fine at this level. In week 9, they allowed Rico Dowdle, who's not anyone's idea of an incredible runner, 21.7 points. So if we can sneak into the double digits, then this would be a great return there. Matt Collins, 2,200. He was somebody you talked about in the main preview show. Obviously, the Bills are completely beaten up at the minute. You've got Keon Coleman, who looks set to miss this game. You've got Amari Cooper, who's wearing a cast. Curtis Samuel led the team in snaps last week, but Matt Collins was just like 1% or 2 behind him. Khalil Shakir seems to be confined to that slot-only role at the minute. Do you think that Matt Collins, going against this tough Chiefs defense, could have a big game?
I think it's worth the dart throw. This is, if Coleman's out, if Cooper's out, we know Matt Collins is going to be on the field because he's one of the best blocking wide receivers in the league. If he's going to be on the field, I think this game's going to have points in it. And there's a chance. We saw last week he posted over 10 points as a 2,200 player. Like, I want to get at least one dirt cheap guy that's got some real upside in my lineup. And it's him if you're looking at the wide receiver position this week, because I think he's going to get the snaps, he's going to get the targets, and at 2,200, there's very few players that are going to get that sort of volume.
Yeah, I believe the team who won the £25 contest last week had MVS, and everyone was talking about Mason Tipton. Everybody overlooked MVS for, in fairness, the right reasons. He had nothing coming into that game that suggested he was going to have a blow-up game. 2,200 hit on absurd numbers, and of course, it just carries you up to the top of the leaderboard. You can make up for a whole bunch when you hit on these guys. Buffalo ranked 3rd in pass rate over expected over the last 4 weeks. The Chiefs also rank 5th, so this should be a good game for passing volume. Anthony Richardson, though, somebody who might not be good for passing volume, 4,200. We talked about the Jets earlier in this one, and one thing that we know is that the Jets sometimes struggle with QBs when they're scrambling. Anthony Richardson hasn't been scrambling as much this year. It's been more design runs, and even then, it's not been as much as we would like. Do you think now that he's back in the lineup, we see Richardson playing with a greater lease of life, and it leads to more fantasy points?
I'd say yes, but with very, very little confidence. Like, I think it's enough for him to kind of sit down, reassess, get his head right, get healthy as well, which I think is, an underrated thing from a guy that carries the ball a lot. He's taken a few hits. He's had 2 weeks to sit and rest. And I think, look, let's be honest, nobody has great confidence in Anthony Richardson. But if you're getting a guy that could have 6, 7 carries, potential for 10 carries, the ceiling is there. Like, him putting up a 20-point fantasy week isn't outrageous. Him doing it at £4,200, this is the bottom price for quarterbacks. We talked last week about, could you manufacture a lineup with Taysom Hill at 3,400 as your quarterback? And it was really intriguing. And actually, I did one lineup and it ended up cashing, and it looks all right. Could you do that this week with Anthony Richardson? You kind of got to hold your nose and dive in, probably not looking to stack it. But actually, could you attack the other side of the matchup, get some of those Jets players in it, chuck in Anthony Richardson as a cheap option at quarterback, and suddenly it opens up the rest of the slate for you?
Absolutely. And I think that's the way I'd look at it. Like, do I take Garrett Wilson and Anthony Richardson and view it as combined points within the game? Anthony Richardson's average 6.8 rush attempts per game this year, 40.3 rushing yards. Only one game over 11.5 points, but we know that it's been a bumpy year. The Jets defense, they are not the unit that they've been in previous seasons. They rank in DVOA against the run. They rank 27th. Against the pass, they rank 15th. Problems all over the field. The vibes are far from immaculate, and it would just be the kind of feel-good story for the Colts to get right, but obviously we know the Jets want to get right as well. So lots to play for there. Of course, we've talked it all through on the main channel. I will be trying to put out some more DFS content, which you could apply to Fantasy Game Day, DraftKings, or FanDuel, wherever you are playing this weekend. And if you haven't tried it already, use code TFS23 for a free second entry. I will be getting off here and starting to put lineups in for tonight's Ballers contest. If you want to use the projection sheet that we use for that showdown, hit the join button over on the main Fantasy Sanctuary channel. Loads more content coming your way. Appreciate you all checking this out.